Welcome to the Composer Conversations podcast. My name is Alex Berner. In this podcast, we dive a little deeper into the personal and philosophical aspects about being a composer. How do we live our lives day to day? What are our values? How do those values create the foundation for our goals? What is a life well lived, and how does our relationship with music incorporate into all of this? In this conversation, I spoke with Bendik Hval. I had an amazing time catching up with him for the first time in about 4 years. He's compassionate, open-minded, generous, and a great human being. He also writes beautiful music, in case you were wondering. Today we talk about self-doubt, Norway, attending college after having already worked in a different career, and a bunch more. I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. So today we're joined by Bendik, and we met in Berkeley probably like 5 years ago now. And I think the first class we had together was dramatic scoring 1 or 2. I remember it was in that like main lecture hall in the film scoring. Unless I'm mistaken, do you remember?
I would say the same thing. That's what I remember too. But I mean, we had a million classes, so it's hard to.
Yeah, yeah. That's a good point. Is when I remember when I'd go over to my friends' schools and like, oh, dude, I have 5 classes this semester, and I think, oh, we've got like. I know that's like more time per class, but still it's a lot to juggle.
It is. I had 12 one semester. I remember that is
yeah,
a lot of homework.
Yeah, a new record. Yeah, so I just want to get into kind of your life like before I knew you, right? So like what made you come to Berkeley? What was your like life like before you decided to do music, or was that ever a thing?
Most definitely was. I remember that I was at a school trip where a friend of mine who played guitar and actually two of my friends from class, they on this trip, and it was somewhere in the Norwegian mountains. I don't even remember where now, but I remember that he pulled out this Ibanez electric guitar. And my other friend, he played the synthesizer, and they played the theme from what's that? Do you remember the attack helicopter thing, Airwolf?
Oh,
Have you ever seen that show?
I don't think I've seen it, but I've heard of it.
Real 80s show. But anyway, so with basically turning this kind of synthy riff that is in that original theme into this heavy rock thing, that's when I basically decided to play guitar. And I was already 14 at that point. So I didn't really start off that early. I think my family probably more. My father's actually was an athlete on a national level in both football and ice hockey. Well, soccer and ice hockey. So and myself, I did taekwondo and that stuff, and I got into basically playing guitar at 14. So that's when it all started for me, and it started up because of mainly my friend playing the Airwolf theme and AC/DC, Angus Young. That's really what got me started. And after that was basically my life, to sit behind a guitar and practice, transcribe whole records, just press play on tape, and then as soon as you had played through the whole album, just start over again. And that was basically what I did. And then if I'm going to kind of, in a way, get into a philosophical corner right there, I know that I had a fairly, I became fairly technically okay on my instrument. I did a lot of the playing all the Yngwie Malmsteen, Steve Vai stuff fairly early. I'd only played a couple of years, but I started doing things that people wanted to learn from me. So when I was 16, I started giving people lessons, basically transcribing things for them, because that's what I did. I just sat down with records all day and I tried to transcribe solos and stuff. And so people, and it's not that I was that good, but I kind of started feeling a little bit of pressure, as though I should be this musician that everybody was looking up to, stuff like that. And it really started making me nervous. And I remember that because of that, music for a certain amount of time, when I was probably around 18, 19, kind of turned into something negative for me, because I've just felt so much pressure on it. And it's just me, myself, that put this pressure on me. I think I kind of invented this. So I put it off for a couple of years, but then I sent in an audition tape for Berkeley when I think I was 20 or 21. And because you could still do that then, you could just go and have an audition. You could actually just record yourself playing and send that in. And if you had a good written application on top of that. And I was accepted then. I was 21, but I simply couldn't afford it. And I was also extremely scared, the idea of going there. Already feeling as though at 21 that I was this old fart at that point, which is kind of interesting because, of course, I started Berkeley when I was 33. So, after I got accepted at Berkeley at that point, and I really wanted to go simply because I've, as anyone else in Europe, you've grown up with all the movies, all the pop culture of the United States. I mean, it means so much to people over here, and it's really been, the soundtrack of my life has been music from the United States, of course, Britain and everywhere else too. But I mean, imagine John Williams and growing up with Star Wars, E.T. That is kind of the soundtrack of your life for so many film composers, at least. I mean, it means a lot to you. So going to the United States was a huge dream. And Berkeley, I don't know why, if it was the Frank Zappa song who says, "You made it, you're cool, you got into the Berkeley Music School." I don't know if that's the reason why I got caught in my mind, but Berkeley just, for me, it was this fantastic place where you could really feel as though I can grow in this place. And plus, living in a small country like Norway, Berkeley is just, it's a fairy tale to go to a place like that. That's just how it feels. And so after I did not go when I was 21 because I simply couldn't afford it, I think my problems in just feeling that I was just nervous, I felt I got the shakes. I couldn't really perform because I felt as though I only had access to 30% of what I could actually do because I had the shivers, shakes, stuff like that. Kind of put things off for a long time, to be honest, with music always being the thing that I wanted to do. But there was a long time in between there that really not much happened. And then, as I said, later in life, I said, you can't not do this. You have to start this up again. And that's why I auditioned and got in and went there. And it's truly been the most fantastic thing I ever did. And despite, of course, if I felt like an old fart when I was 21, you can imagine how it is when you passed 30. But the cool thing about Berkeley is that I never felt as though anyone at all, no one made me feel old there at all. If I did something that was okay, if you just had, done an assignment or something and you showed this to people, the acceptance and the how people reacted positively to you was just so wonderful. And I just felt like one of the crowd, really, despite being, maybe 15 years older than many of my fellow students at that point. So that really was great for me. Plus, I think that when you're that grown up, as I was at that point, you really, why you're there, and you kind of have some life experience. So in my little ego world, I kind of feel as though that was a good thing. Not that anyone else didn't have just as amazing an experience as I did, but I mean, I think it's easy to kind of see through all the things that you might experience if you're first time you live away from home. And, at that point, of course, I'd lived on my own and lived an adult professional life in Norway for many years already. So it was just a real change of pace for me, but extremely grateful that I got to do it. And it was a wonderful experience for me. So that's basically it.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, no, I that's a common theme I hear. So my dad was a college professor. He taught fisheries and wildlife. And one of the things he would tell me the most was like, people come to college too early before they're sure about what they want to do. And he's like, the students that always do the best are the students that come back that are a little older and have already experienced other things. And I think when I went to Berkeley, I don't think I totally got everything out of it because I was 18, right? Like I had just gotten out of high school in my little bubble. And I also grew up playing guitar and playing Steve Vai. And, I think it was Dream Theater that made me want to go to Berkeley, right? Okay. So, I grew up in this small town and like was the only one that really did much with, like guitar with classical music, right? Like I grew up playing an orchestra, but guitar was really when I realized, oh, I want to do this. Um, but I always had in the back of my mind the idea like, oh, I'd be happy doing so many things though. I have so many interests. It doesn't have to be music. Like if that doesn't work out, I can always go do this or do that. And basically I think I went through school with that, not kind of limiting how much I pushed myself to my fullest potential, because I always had that kind of like plan B option. Like, so when it got hard, it wasn't like I just have to do it. I mean, I still did it, but I don't think I got everything I could have out of it. And it wasn't until, yeah,
Yeah.
it wasn't until after um, I came down here and I did real estate for like a year and a half, and
Oh,
it just did not click. And then that was the first time where I felt like I need to do music. I need to go back and I need to put everything into it like 100%. And I just started restudying and relearning everything on my own. And I
right.
feel like so much more grateful for that opportunity now than I did. And it was funny because I did exactly what my dad was always saying people do too much. But that
Exactly.
point definitely resonates with me, even though I kind of did the other direction.
Sure, but I mean, still though, and I've been thinking about this myself because I never really had the, even though I played guitar for a very long time, and basically, sitting in my room at my parents' house, basically transcribing things when some of my later fellow students at Berkeley weren't even born. You get kind of good ears doing that, so that was a good thing for me. So ear training was which is something a lot of people struggle with, which was for me something that I finally felt as though, okay, this is one element of what I've been doing that now it's kind of paying off. So this is cool, and I'm kind of learning how to really utilize ear training, stuff like that. But I never really got into music theory that much, and to go to a place like Berkeley where you basically and you truly have access to learn basically everything. I mean, if you want to expand on things, I feel as though uh, after having graduated from a place like that, to continue studying now is just so wonderful because it really laid down a theoretical foundation and stuff like that, which basically means teaching yourself and wanting to take it to the next step. I feel as though Berkeley really did a fantastic job doing that for me. If I want to sit down now, and I've been reading some books about bar talk, for example, in terms of writing atonal music, stuff like that. I've been writing some atonal music actually, just because towards the Indiana Jones thing, where you in Temple of Doom, where you actually hear atonal music just to create the chaos and the scary stuff in the temple and stuff like that. But I love that kind of music. And so to be able to actually sit down now and with a book and have kind of the basis and the foundation to do something like that is really wonderful. And do you feel now that you can that Berkeley gave you that, so that when you kind of get back to it and have gotten back to it, as I know you have, you feel that it gave you that foundation, so that now you're kind of you're just set to go and continue your own evolution?
Yeah, I think that's a good representation, I feel like, of the most important thing I learned there. It's like
Yeah.
having the detector to learn, to realize what I need to learn, right? It's
Yeah,
like
exactly. Yeah.
like the theoretical foundation, right? It's the path to understand, oh, here's what I don't know. It like exposes all these realms, even just by knowing what the other majors are, right? Like um you know jazz composition, like I know what that entails. I don't know how to do it, right? I don't know the high level jazz comp classes, but I know the general idea of what the material would be if I wanted to pursue that. And
Yes.
also kind of the rigorousness of like a performance program, right?
Yeah.
I, like you, I knew very early, based on my own just anxiety, that I didn't want to be on stage, right? Yeah, I played some gigs in high school and with my band and around, but that was the extent of it. I did not want to be up on stage playing recitals on guitar, and even just practicing it. I realized probably within 2 days of entering Berkeley that I didn't have what it took to become a guitar performance major.
Oh, really? Okay.
It was just because I was like, I can't sit and practice for 8 hours a day. Like, I can't do that. Like, I don't like it that much. It's not something I'm that passionate about
Right.
because I just, but I could sit in front of a computer and write for 8 hours a day or more, that was fine with me. So, and that's kind of what I had been doing, but it helped to clarify kind of my, um, spot, right? What I could do to a professional standard based on just passion and time I could stand spending on one thing, the focus. Um,
That's a pretty great reflection, though. I mean, it kind of it gives you can I say to understand something like that, because I mean, in a way it sounds kind of brutal. I mean, if you had dreamt, for example, about doing the whole thing, I could see in myself that if I felt, because I did sometimes in my teens, I did those long hours,
Mhm.
and I was kind of fine with it because it wasn't just sitting there and doing the technical stuff. It was just as much playing to records, but transcriptions and stuff like that. As long as you were playing, you're still evolving. So I kind of consider that to be practicing. But if I and initially when I was 21, I was supposed to be a performance major because that was all I was doing back then.
Mhm.
And uh, if I got to Berkeley and realized that holy shit, everyone else practices 10 to 12 hours every day, or 8, or even 5. 5 hours is still a lot. It's actually a lot.
Mhm.
Not to say 8, but 5. Even 4 is actually pretty much, if you think about it, especially when you study at a place like that, with everything you have to do. And not to speak of later in life, where you actually have to make a living as well. But I can kind of see myself not being as mature, because if I came there and felt that I can't do this, I'm not sure if I could tell myself that this is not really it. I mean, I'm pretty sure that you could probably do it if you push yourself to doing it, though. So it's that, but still, I would probably just kind of bury it and just become depressed. That's what I think. So that's kind of mature of you to actually kind of say, I can sit here and write and do that. It's very sound approach to what you wanted to do in music. I'm kind of impressed by that, to be honest.
Well, thank you. That's, I think, my biggest strength is realizing when I'm not in the right spot for myself, right? I'm very quick to realize like it's not right. Like my intuition about that's very strong, and I think that's what's led me to get on a path that I feel like is right for me because
Right.
I'm quick to quit, you know, and I think that's a bad thing too in some ways. But um when something just feels totally wrong and I know that like I can't sustain it, I think it's because I'm always kind of thinking long term. I'm thinking like, is this something I really think that I can do? Like you said, even 4 hours a day. Like I was
Yeah.
having trouble getting myself to practice, um, if just 3 hours a day or 2 hours a day. And I think also I learned something from the whole period between when I auditioned and when I
Mhm.
got in, that there
Yeah.
was just this anxious energy that I didn't touch my guitar once for like a couple months, 3 months, I
Yeah.
don't know. And
I can relate.
yeah, and I think for me that's one of the things that just told me like I don't know if I really love it enough, and I kind of have some elements of what you were talking about with feeling like the pressure, right? Like, oh, I'm
Yeah.
getting good at this. I kind of have a responsibility to become this. And I think I had a little bit of that was making me continue doing guitar even when my interests had shifted much more to computer-based composing and just learning, music software. And in high school, I just had like a keyboard that had some sounds on it, and I just straight up did an audio output. So I didn't have any clue what MIDI was. I had no clue what a seventh chord was. I was
No.
totally inexperienced with theory. So that going back to your point about Berkeley kind of creating that path to understanding and learning, I don't know where I would be and how quickly I would have understood the full scope of music and what there was you had to learn, because I was clueless. Like I really was. I showed up and got placed in all level ones for everything and
Yeah.
music theory one. I tested into like ear training too. And within, one class, I was like, I can't do, I have no idea what's going on. Send me back to one.
Right. Exactly.
Um, But yeah, so let's move on to kind of after Berkeley. What was your attitude as you were leaving, and what were your goals, and then kind of bring us to where you're at right now.
Yeah, well, I haven't in any way made the big time, so I'm still kind of a struggling composer. I'll say that. Um, I've had some good projects, though. I think I was lucky in one regard, because when I did was probably my seventh semester, which was 2016 spring, and then I did summer, which was my final semester. I was actually commissioned to write the music for a documentary back home, which I did. Um, uh, so that in itself was it was a very good project. It was a nice documentary about actually Norwegian females becoming paratroopers in the military. They're able to really join the forces there, and that wasn't open for women before. And now, as far as I know, I think they're still open for that, which is kind of cool. And this documentary had something to do with that, which was kind of cool. And I remember I wrote this main theme for the thing, which, if anything, it reminds me more of a Game of Thrones theme in a way, because it's a very orchestral thing. And that's really, I wanted to do that because I just had so much fun sitting there with, the orchestral samples, and suddenly being able to do that. So it was a great experience, and I was so fortunate that I could just go straight back home. I chose to go back home to Norway. I mean, if I could, I would have loved to stay in the US. The thing is that the Norwegian currency, the crowns or the kroner, that was, I think you got $1 for 5.35 kroners or something when I started Berkeley. And that was the first semester in 2013. And then after one semester, that you had to pay, because there was some inflation stuff. The currency just bounced, and it was almost 9 kroners. Oh, so basically, I ended up paying almost 40% more for the whole thing. I mean, I could basically buy an apartment for what I ended up paying for Berkeley, and I paid for all of it myself. So that's why I kind of had to go back. I couldn't live on a couch in LA and be a free intern anywhere. I simply couldn't, because I had to start paying back my mortgage. Well, not mortgage, but my loans immediately. So that was kind of the thing. So that's why I wanted to go back, even though I wanted to stay in the US. I really wanted to. I loved it there. Boston was just fantastic for me. And I wanted to go to LA, yeah, and everything, but I couldn't do that. So, but I had that one project, and after that, I did then, because since 2002, actually, my God, I'm getting so old. That's when I started working in the PRO, working with the music licensing. And as soon as I came back, I think I had 1 year where basically what I did was writing, trying to just, I wrote a jingle here, commercial there, did stuff like that. And then they asked me if I could just come back and work for a couple of months at the licensing society, or the Performance Rights Society. So I did that. And then as soon as I'm there, I know these people so well, and it's good money. And I managed to just write music at night while I was working in the daytime. So I did that, and have been kind of doing that. And then for a year or two after that, and now I'm still working with the Performing Rights Society, but only like 60%. So I have 2 or 3 days a week where I do that. The rest of the time I just work on different projects. So I have written 3 documentaries now, I think, that I've scored. Also a full TV show, but that was more of a not a full TV show. That's actually a lie. I wrote the main theme, and then just lots of music that they could place where they wanted to. But this was kind of a reality thing about people who kind of secure rocks not falling down the cliff sides in the Norwegian mountains. Just crazy people, just basically real redneck Norwegians that just blow up mountains so that they shouldn't fall down on the roads. So it was kind of a cool project. So that was so many episodes. I think it was 24 episodes or something. So they also had a lot of stock music, but I think I wrote about 40 minutes of music for that they could just place around, plus the main theme and stuff, which was kind of okay. And then my final big project, which was just before the Corona thing, was that I got to I was musical director, me and a friend of mine called Melkeveien, or the Milky Way in Norwegian. He's a DJ. And we basically did Tchaikovsky's The Nutcracker, where they wanted to create kind of a more of a modern, more electronic version of that. So I was musical director for that, which was cool because they actually hired the prima ballerina from the National ballet for that. So it was kind of writing music, and I also performed the whole thing, where there were guitar and keyboard parts and just doing all the music stuff on stage. So that was kind of cool. So that was a big one before Christmas. And that's basically what I've been doing. And right now, in the lockdown, I've just been writing a lot of stuff for myself. I bought the Spitfire Audio BBC Orchestra, actually, which I really like. I think that it's kind of fluent, beautiful thing. So just to sit here and try to work on orchestrations. At the same time, I bought a graduation present for myself, which was an analog synthesizer. Bought a couple of new ones, and I'm just really getting into synthesis and sound design and just trying to learn all this stuff, because that's basically been my life. And I think that is my life right now, that you love writing, then I just love arranging and orchestration. I also love sitting there just noodling with synthesizers, but I also kind of am getting more into production. Really been doing I've been producing pop songs for people who just come to me with their tunes, and I've been producing and arranging them, recording them and stuff like that. And it's hard because I want to do all these things. And now I'm kind of into the groove of, I really want to start practicing my instrument again. But if you want to both write, orchestrate, arrange, produce, learn how to mix and master and stuff, so many things that, I mean, you have to be good at one thing. You can't be good at 15. So that's kind of a challenge in a way. But that's where I'm at right now. There's a friend of mine actually who runs this animation company, and I'm just writing music for his commercials. I think there are these commercials or spots that small businesses they basically animate these little things to represent the company. And I'm producing a couple of tunes for this guy who's he's just a private person, but he's got money and he really wants me to produce music for him, which is kind of cool. So that's where I'm at right now.
Very cool. What have you learned that you like doing the most or don't want to do again throughout these projects?
I think it's still the problem is that I like all of it to such an extent that I don't really, because in the beginning it was hard because, as you were talking about, I was guitar was my thing when I came to Berklee, for example. That's always been my thing. I knew some theory, but I couldn't just sit down and write things in a huge score, or I couldn't really know how functional harmony worked out, stuff like that. These are the things that you kind of learn. Same thing with, if you want to get into the more production side and sound design side of music, where, for example, synthesizers, I really didn't know how a synthesizer worked, for example. And in the beginning, I thought it was really hard because you just sat there with a synthesizer, you don't really know what it is. And then you start just feeling like that's always been my biggest problem, is that I feel like a complete idiot when I can't master something immediately. And so I've been through this process of trying to learn synthesizers, and then you feel like an idiot, and then I actually gotten fairly good at it, really understanding the architecture of different synthesizers and working a lot with digital stuff after I started with all my analog synthesizers. Actually learning it by just twisting the knobs, which was wonderful for me. Just truly understanding how an envelope works is actually kind of interesting, because it's simple enough when you know it, but when you don't know what an envelope is on a synthesizer, and you truly know how that can shape sound, just importing a sound into a contact player and then being able to add envelopes to basically change all the parameters and make this wonderful playable character in the sound. Those things are just magical for me. And instead of giving up on these things, when it also came to production and also orchestration, reading scores, stuff like that, it was always hard to start the new thing. And then I always wanted to give up on all of it while I was doing it. But right now I feel as though at least I'm okay at some of the stuff. So now I'm more interested in doing all of it, but I don't have time for that. But I can say that the biggest challenge, though, and this is one of my, this is a thing that I'm kind of bummed out about, to be honest, because some of the projects that we did at Berklee, and I remember when, my 8th semester, when we scored the short film and stuff like that, it was Richard Davis that I had. And I remember I felt that he gave great feedback. Also, Andreas Björk, the other Norwegian teacher, who was younger than me, who taught me. It was so much fun. He always gave such fantastic feedback. And when I listened back to some of the things I did back then, I think those assignments and projects are 10 times better than a lot of the stuff I did for that first documentary, which was supposed to be the professional one when I got out. And I think a lot of stuff that I did for that was really, really bad. And the reason why it was so bad was because I was terrified that, now you're going to be exposed as someone who doesn't know anything. Oh, you went to Berklee Music School, and then you can't do anything, Are they just going to call me a fraud now? Am I going to expose myself completely? And what I did then was that when I tried to make something, it was so typical that I would just grasp on the first thing that I came to that sounded something like music, even though how horrifically bad, horrendously bad it was. I would still I would just roll with it because I was sure that, well, I'm not going to get any other ideas. And I think only now, the last year maybe, is when I'm actually allowed myself to say that if you write something that is absolutely horrible, it's a good thing, because then you have a starting off point. You know what won't work. It can inspire you to do something that is good, and you can use it productively. And that is what I've learned the most. And I also think that in terms of being a composer or trying to actually write music, that has been huge for me, just to get to that point where I'm able to give myself time to try things. And I'm so thankful to the likes of Hans Zimmer and Jerry Goldsmith and all of these people who very openly talk about their own process and how nervous they are. When you have the most professional people on earth who kind of show their vulnerability, and that makes you feel like a little less of a jump when you're working on these things. So yeah, that's been a huge process for me, actually. And so to continue on that, I guess maybe the composition itself is what I should focus most on going forward. But as I said, I just love all of it so much. And all of it's become more fun now that I kind of allow myself to fail a little bit more.
Yeah. And I think you bring up a good point. It's like the more the less confident you probably get in your own abilities, the more you realize you don't know. I'm sure there's a place where that turns around too, where you're like starting to be like, okay, I think I've done enough. I think I know what I'm doing, even if I'm not.
Newton Howard mentioned this, where he said that, he still is nervous, but he, at least now he knows that there is light at the end of the tunnel. He's proven to himself that even though it feels horrific now, he kind of knows that there is this, he comes to this point where it kind of turns around. He just knows it. It's just part of the process now. And that's a huge thing.
Yeah. And I think you also brought up another important thing, which was the feedback we got in school, and yep. Like Andreas would write up these huge things at like 3 a.m., describing like how you could improve it. And that was so valuable. Like, I think I might have even copied and pasted those and saved those like little emails of feedback, because I just thought it was amazing. And I've tried to set that up in my own work now, where I have a friend, actually the person who I did the first episode of this series with, my friend Kyle Franklin, also from Berklee. And he was a dual major composition and film scoring student, and he has a lot of experience with orchestration. And so everything I do, I send to him, and when he has time, he gives me feedback on it, and I do the same for him, and it's so helpful to have another take, and it feels a little bit safer when you have that, to be able to, stop it at the point where, like, I don't think I could spend another 10 hours on this, but I feel like I can call it done, and if anything stands out, he'll catch it. I think it's so helpful to have other people around to be able to check work, and just to help show your blind spots and be like a mirror, after so long working on one piece. Like, what I'm doing right now is very high intensity battle music with like fully orchestral. So and I'm doing stuff like working with, each individual flute and each individual horn and everything. So there's a lot of notes, and these take me so long that by the end, I don't know if it's good anymore. Like, when I was working on it for the first 5-10 hours, I was excited about it. But now that I'm a week into it, and there's, thousands and thousands of notes, and I don't know, I have to give it to somebody else and be like, what do you think? Because I'm lost. But no, I think that was a huge thing, and learning how to receive and give feedback too. I think there's such a uh it's like the most important thing we need to grow, right? Is to have that cycle be allowed to happen. But so many of us turn off that loop, I think, especially when we're young. You know, it's like, oh, I don't want to hear, I want to just kind of sit in thinking that my thing is good and that I'm good at it. And I don't want to hear people criticize it. At least that's where I was at when I was younger. But I think a lot of that comes from people giving bad feedback, right? In a way that is condescending or rude, and it kind of turns us off to the whole idea of it, because I never felt bad when I got feedback from Andreas, even if he was like, this doesn't work, you know, but he explained
No.
why, and it was clear that he had like good intention. You know, he had good intention, and you understood that he was trying to make it, like, your writing better, and there was nothing personal about it. But I've heard so many horror stories, especially in, you know, classical music, from friends who are performers, just tear you down on a personal level too. And from my perspective, I'm like, there's no way this is helpful, right? To just be uh it's just very mean and toxic to you beyond the actual feedback. So I think there's a kind of culture that's perpetuated by, you know, in my opinion, probably people who aren't 100% happy with what they're doing, and kind of transfer that down the chain and end up creating this like mechanism where young people are afraid of feedback when it should be the thing that they're seeking out, you know?
Yeah, might very much. Yeah, I think so. I completely agree. It's I would be still, sadly, sometimes I really feel anxious about getting feedback on stuff.
Oh, totally. Me too. Even when I know it's going to be the most, you know, helpful thing, and I know I need it, it's still
Yeah.
just like when the first time I posted something on a forum, you know, to get feedback, I was like,
Oh, that's a big one, though. I mean, I've mostly just gone to people I know and posted stuff there because sometimes I really just put it out there. I mean, I just publish the stuff and then
yeah, I think that's great too. I think there's, you know, deadlines can be so useful for us because they actually give us a, you know, it's a deadline, what time we have,
that's
is
very
like
true.
good enough. And because I know there's this piece I was working on that's only 3 minutes, but I literally, if I didn't have to just get on to the next thing, I probably would have taken an actual month on it because of how intricate and how many notes there were. I'll send it to you afterwards so you can see what I mean. But like, it was, I I could have spent an endless amount of time, you know, nitpicking everything and trying to get it realistic. And in some ways, that's a good thing to do once in a while, I think, to kind of see what the potential is, and to see, because that's one of the things I've sent around for feedback, because I'm like, this is really the best I can do. Right. So anything that is wrong here or could be improved is something that I don't know how to do. You know, it's a
Mhm.
full representation of the best possible quality. And I think it'll also be interesting to go back in, you know, 10 years and see, like, that was the best thing I could do. I put all the time to get it to 98% quality of what I'm capable of.
Yeah.
And from, because I feel like that's more valuable feedback tool for me than something that I worked on for 5 hours. I'm like, what do you guys think? Because like, I know the mix could be better. I know the orchestration could be improved. I know this could be better. And those are the kind of things I'd get comments on. So um, yeah, just a thought.
No, absolutely. And yeah, as you said, deadlines too. It's so easy to nitpick your own stuff too. But at the same time, though, if, as you said, I think that if you, especially if you listen to popular music right now, I mean, production is key, right? I mean, the people who truly have a great, some rhythmic, drum beat, whatever. If you have those kind of iconic synthesizer sounds, that means so much more than writing a good melody. And I mean, every progression in the world has been written 5 million times already, basically. So production is a lot of it. So just to, I've always felt anxious about that too. If I was just to give something, this is an idea I have. Do you think this is in itself, is it intrinsically something that would offer something to you, even though it's not produced that well? And no, no matter how much my disclaimer was that this is just an idea, the feedback would be, well, I don't like the production, man. This could be so much cooler and blah, 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 and all that stuff. But what I really want, I love what you said about Andreas, because it's fantastic feedback. And I remember that I just exported all my emails. So I still have lots of things that he sent me personally on email. Things that I just asked him about, things outside of class too. And he just gave me these feedback, essays basically, which were wonderful. But the shortest and most concise ones that didn't hurt me either was Richard Davis, because I remember I just came to class one, and this was the, I think it was the final project or something. It was just one-on-one, and he just said, "I'm just not digging it, man." That's all he said. I think that is that, and he is a West Coast guy, and that was one of the high points at Berkeley for me when he said, "I just don't dig it." That is actually absolutely wonderful, because I understood immediately that there was nothing malicious about that. He just honestly didn't like it, and that is just wonderful. And when you're in that kind of an environment, kind of that thing as being a student, you kind of expect to be criticized in a way. And I think you need to have hard skin when you work in a business like this, because if you meet a movie director who is kind of a big personality, they won't hold back in their criticisms. So you need tough skin, but at the same time, I so agree with you that you can be constructive, and I think you will learn so much more by getting constructive criticism than someone just beating you down. And it is horrifically sad to get a beat down when you really poured your heart and soul into something.
Yeah, and I feel like the fear of not doing it has got to be stronger than the fear of being criticized for it,
Very much. Yeah, that's well said.
And I think that's, going back to what we were talking about earlier, I think that's where I was not at first. When I first exited Berkeley, I was more afraid of not being good enough than I was of not doing it. And then like I said, once I did something else, that just totally switched. I was like, nope, got to do it. Don't care. I'll take the feedback. I'll take the criticism. Doesn't matter. I just can't not do this,
Right. That's all part of the journey, though. So, I mean, in the end, it's all great.
Yeah. So I kind of want to move on to a lot of people talk about goals, like I want to be this or that, or I want to achieve this or that. And I think that's cool. And I think it's a helpful kind of metric to use to assess your progress. But I'm more interested in kind of the values that create those goals. And like, for example, the values of, to you, like, what is a life well lived? So, for example, mine would be kind of a value in growth, responsibility, and kindness, right? So these are the kind of foundational values that create how I navigate the world, right? And obviously I have a passion for music, but that fits in with these things, right? It fits in with growth because I like learning. I want to keep learning, and there's an unlimited amount of stuff to learn in this profession. So that fits. And responsibility, showing up, getting it done on time. And that's something that I can do. I like taking on responsibility. I have a natural kind of inclination to go commit to doing things and pull it off. And then kindness, I think there's, like we've kind of been alluding to, there's a lot of negative energy, and I want to be kind of a counterpoint to that, right? There's a lot of self-doubt, and even not from person to person, but from somebody to themselves,
Yeah.
Self-hatred, anxiety, self-loathing, stuff that I want to try to, especially with this channel and this podcast, try to go against the grain with. So my core values kind of line up with what I'm doing, and that helps me to minimize a lot of my tangential ideas, like, oh, maybe I could go do that, or maybe I could go do that. But these kind of keep me on track because there's something that is core to who I am, instead of just an arbitrary, like, I will score a feature film by the time I'm 40. And again, like I said, that could be a good guiding path. But to me, if I don't do that, but I do something else that future me thinks is of equal value, I'm cool with that too.
Yeah.
So do you have any like kind of foundational values that you feel like guide how you approach your life in different situations?
It's money and power, money and power, and then it's a clear run to the grave. No, I very much agree with you. I mean, what I experience more and more is, of course, the fact that not being in my 20s anymore, and to be honest, not even being in my 30s, I know that the train left the station a long time ago if I want to do something as the young prodigy, and I know that, and that is basically just a part of life experience and how you have to adjust to where you are and what you do. So I think I kind of, maybe I should divide it into two things. One is just who you are in terms of being a human being, hopefully being someone who people can appreciate just as a force of good in their life. And I think that is absolutely, as you said, that's basically kindness. It's feeling that, you know, I find myself being very fortunate in having close friends that I trust my life with these people. I really do. Not that many, but I have some, and they're a core group in my life. And to basically just be kind and faithful to these people, that is probably my strongest core value, which gives meaning to any life, I think. And I think that's going well. I've also been very fortunate there that in terms of, you know, my family and also the people that we've lost over the years, you know, grandparents and stuff like that. I've always felt as though when they left, they knew how much I loved them. For example, just being open about that, being able to have a relationship where you can comfortably show and share with kindness and goodness of heart. When it comes to the whole music thing and goals there, I mean, in a way, sometimes I feel as though you're way too old. And that has definitely been a thing of it. You know, I had kind of, I sold my apartment and my motorcycle and everything I had. I worked basically prepping freight trains in the cold winter Norwegian nights just to earn enough money to pay for the first semester at Berkeley. So I kind of threw everything out the window that I had built up at that point, because I had a really nice apartment in a nice place in Oslo and kind of established myself there. But I knew that I wanted to do this music thing. And right now I can say that, okay, I've done the whole Berkeley thing. I've actually had some good projects. Maybe some great projects will be coming my way. It's possible. As of right now, actually, I don't know. But it sometimes feels a little bad that, okay, you're a little, you know, it would be nice to have 15 years. If I think 15 years in the future now, that feels kind of bad. I kind of feel the clock ticking all the time. But at the same time, what that has done to me is that I basically decided to just say, to hell with it. I'm just going to do this. Because I think one of the main reasons why people don't get where they want to go sometimes, because you have to just hang in there, basically. And, you know, you may not succeed. You know, it's not a surefire hit that you will succeed if you just hang in there. You also have to really have the work ethic and work hard and try to get somewhere. And I don't know if I would be happy if I got to score a major motion picture, or if I won a Grammy, or I won an Oscar. You know, I don't think I would be happy doing that either. So right now, my goal is basically just to find happiness doing what I do every single day. And that has been kind of a good thing during this whole coronavirus thing too, that sitting just in my small studio that I have here, writing things, when I come up with ideas that I truly like, and when I manage to, for example, arrange and orchestrate things that sound like something I would not even remotely possible for me to do something like that not many years ago, to feel that growth, that gives me so much joy that at this point, that is what I kind of try to latch on to. And then I just hope that I'll be responsible and grown up enough that if I realize one day that you're never going to achieve like the utmost dream of scoring a movie or having a hit album or whatever, if I can get through life learn things, be happy, and do the whole kindness thing and have a good life with my friends and my family. I think that's the main thing. I just have to bank on
Yeah, I think that's a great, insightful answer. I think it's very self-aware, and from all my studies of meditation and practice of basically just philosophical traditions that help try to aim you at a more examined and better life. That's the common theme, right? What you aim for, if it's a tangible, like objective goal, like scoring a film, getting a Grammy, these things will give you a little high for a short while, but then if anything, it just puts more pressure and increases those negative thought patterns because, oh, now you've got more pressure. Now you've got more to live up to. Are you going to be a failure? Are you a one hit wonder? And what you described with trying to find a happy life where you're constantly growing, I mean, I think that's the path to happiness, right? And those other things, when they come, or if they come, are like great little positives, that little presents that come along the way, and it's like, that's awesome, I'm glad that happened, but it's not integral to your idea of yourself or your notion of success. So I totally agree. For me, it's very similar. As long as I'm growing and getting better at what I'm doing, I also find so much joy. And like, wow, listening back to how I remade and produced and orchestrated this track that I wrote 3 years ago, and how much better it is. I'm like, I'm just happy it's better. I'm happy the learning's been working. I've been absorbing. My brain's been doing things, and not just, the thing I'm afraid of, I think the most, is just stagnating, right? And if I was totally content, just in my life, that, maybe this wouldn't be a problem, but I just want to continue growing the opportunities for myself, for my future self, to be able to have more opportunities and more freedom later on, where I can do things like support myself financially, and then be allowed to, not be allowed to, but like focus on community and friend groups. And what you said about that's also interesting, because there's been so much research lately about how important community is to people's well-being, and the rates of depression and anxiety going up seem to be very correlated with a lack of community, and the people who have what they would describe as a close-knit group of friends, a good social life, and feel like they're part of something, live longer, and if
it.
if we love doing what we're doing, that's the goal, right? Live longer, do it longer, be able to do more. It's not, I can't wait till I'm 60 so I can retire, or 65. Like, that's not, I hear my friends that are in jobs they hate talking about, oh, I just can't wait, I'm going to try to retire early. And like, I don't know if I can do this past, you know 50 or 45. I'm like, I feel so grateful that I don't feel that way.
Wonderful, wonderful. If I could, I can be romantic and imagine myself at 75 sitting in some Chesterfield sofa with a cigar and a cognac. If I'm still in good health, that's going to be pretty cool. I'm kind of looking forward to that, but on the way to that, I hope things are going to be good. But thank you, Alex, because Jesus, it's been such a long time since I even spoke English with someone, and you put it very well there. You put it very succinctly what I really meant to. Yeah, thanks for that.
Of course. Cool. To try to get back a little bit into work and what that looks like for you, because I think some people have such different flows and rhythms and how they do things. I think that's always interesting to dive into and just see how different people work differently. And one of the concepts I've figured out for myself is basically, my body and my mind and my emotions are very dependent on the world around me, right? I can't decide if my brain chemistry, my adrenaline goes down at night, or, how my body's natural rhythm is. So I've found a routine for myself that works for me and optimizes when I'm writing, like melodies and harmony, and actually just the creative things are firing and writing words and video outlines and journal entries. I do that all in the morning, and I can be so much more productive and get stuff done so much more quickly. And then in the afternoons, evenings, I do like self-care stuff. I do exercise, because if I sit here and try to work, nothing's going to happen at 4 p.m. I'm going to be sitting here and just kind of meandering over all the stuff and tweaking a few notes here and there, trying out a few things. But at the end of the 3-hour afternoon block, I'll just be, well, not much happened. And so I switched that to doing self-care, other things, errands, little things I need to do to maintain my ability to be alive. And then in the nights, I do like to do editing, fine tuning things, really crafting something, whether it's words or music, MIDI data, editing, all that works better at night. I have a different kind of focus. It's a less creative spark and more of a receptiveness to listening to what is going on and how I can enhance it or fix it. So I was wondering, when you're working on a project, or even just like the personal stuff that you're working on now, have you noticed any trends in your own in yourself that work better for you? And is there anything you've ever tried to do that just wasn't working, and then when you switched how you were approaching it, clicked, if that makes sense?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Oh, that's a good question, actually. I haven't been that analytical about it, to be honest. As I said, just being able to just sit down, work on something. I'm not really dependent on when I do it. I feel that probably at night I feel more productive. And I mean, now I still have, this is my last week of vacation right now. And I don't go to bed until 4 or 5 in the morning. I never do, because there's something about it getting dark and lonesome that I also love. And I always feel creative in those periods. But when I write something, I always end up taking a long walk after having come up with an idea. And it's always either doing that walk or taking a shower or something. That's when the solution kind of comes to making it what it ends up becoming. I mean, almost every time I think that has happened. I think it can sometimes be so daunting just to sit by the keyboard. You can come up with something, and then just to really to work it out right then and there is very hard for me. So it has a tendency just to show up in my brain when I get to just kind of process it in a more philosophical way, almost just thinking about it, getting some true emotions to it. Because I don't know if that's just something with me, but it's like when you have some hardware, like a computer here or a keyboard, it's like if that is supposed to express it to you, I somehow, instead of feeling that I kind of get attached to the thing that can actually produce the notes I want to play, it's like my eyes just register the keyboard as this black and white thing, and it doesn't really mean anything to me anymore. And I'm not free to improvise or really get anywhere. That often happens to me. So I would say that my process usually is I start out really just trying to think about what I want to accomplish. Then I see if I can write something very simply, just to have something to build from. And then I just have to try to process it away from all the gear. And then I just try to kind of build it up from there. And then when I come back, I'll just start working just more directly with it all. And one thing that I do that I know is not very healthy is that I start, doing the whole orchestration, arranging, finishing the MIDI stuff way too early or way too soon. Because if I have 4 measures of something, if I have an idea and I think, oh goodness, it would be so cool to have this synth sound, and then just have this huge wave of sound coming on top of that, for example. If that is an orchestral thing, for example, I have a tendency to just build up these huge projects, and I will actually almost orchestrate fully those 4 measures with perfect MIDI, even though it's kind of idiotic to do it at that point. But it will inspire me so much to hear if I can actually obtain that feeling that I initially had. I wanted this in your face kind of thing. And if 4 measures really gives me that, that will inspire me to go on. So that's just something that happens to me. But other than that, when I work in the day and stuff like that, it really doesn't matter, because I can probably eat 20 pizzas and feel happy, and then I can not eat anything and I will still not be disgruntled by that. For some reason, I don't really have my biology interfering too much, which is kind of okay. So, well, I guess my biology is absolutely interfering in different ways. But yeah, so not too much analytical work on the process, except for that, really taking those trips, letting ideas grow, and also allowing myself to fail in the process. That is basically my main thing. And I don't have too much more to say about it, to be honest, because I remember also James Newton Howard. I'm referencing these guys all the time now, but I just remember he said this wonderful thing that when you start out on a project, and if you're sitting there and you feel this debilitating fear, he's just like, just sit down and write some beautiful music, because the rest of it will work out. And I mean, it is so true to conform your music to different, if it's footage that you're actually supposed to conform the music to, it's so easier to do if you have a good idea, and that idea can come from so many things to me. So
Totally.
Yeah,
I think,
and I guess, sorry, but I mean, if I know that I'll only get 1 hour sleep because I didn't get to start on this project before 11 p.m. and I know I have the deadline by tomorrow, for example, those things doesn't freak me out that much. For me, it's kind of, if it will happen, it will happen. So then I will just do it when I'm ready to do it. And that's why I haven't kind of bound myself to knowing that I want to do it in this period of the day. And as of right now, it's good. At the same time, I see a lot of value about what you said, which is a very sound way of kind of approaching these things, knowing that these times of day is when I will be most productive in this and this and etc. That's interesting to me. I'll have to think about that and try to see if I can improve myself on those things.
Yeah, no, I'm very analytical, sometimes to the point of overkill, for sure, with tracking everything I do every 30 minutes of the day, so I can break down like how I can move things around and rearrange. And I'm also very...
Is that also with your workout thing? Sorry to interrupt you, but I mean, that also with your... Is it something that comes from the workout thing, or is that something that you've always had?
So I think it came from two things. Working out was one of those, where, you know, because back when we were in college, I did 2 bodybuilding competitions and a strongman one, and I needed to be very regimented about when I ate and when, you know, what I ate. I counted every calorie and every, you know, different micro and macronutrient I had, and had the spacing at the times of day to like increase my ability to work out harder. So there was a part of it with that, but another part of it was I didn't know how much I was working. You know what I mean? I'd hear about like 40-hour work week. I was like, I have no clue, because I work a little bit here, a little bit then. So I started tracking to kind of see how much am I actually working at something. I don't know how many, like if I was practicing or something, like how many hours did I actually practice piano this week to try to pass my basic keyboarding class? I don't know. Like, and so I started tracking these things to try to get some idea of where I was at, so that I wasn't totally clueless when I I wasn't totally clueless to understand why I failed or why I succeeded. And I found a very strong correlation between the things that I put the most time into, I did better. You know, it's pretty standard thing that everybody would assume is true, but having that data helped to solidify that concept in my mind, where, okay, if I'm not doing it well enough, I just need to put more time into it. And that kind of took a level of anxiety and stress off of me, because it's like it took any kind of self-doubt or you know, being overly critical of myself to be able to kind of reduce that down to, I just didn't put enough time in, and I can fix that. I can just work more. I can schedule more time to practice this. So that's been something I've continued and used to try to balance projects. But in having all this data, I still have my Google Calendars from school in Berkeley, where I could go back and look at when I had each class and when I worked out, did every workout. And it's I start to see patterns emerge. You know, as humans, we're like, one of our main traits is being able to see patterns in things and analyze those. So I saw these patterns basically like, oh, if I work out in the morning, I don't get any work done. I end up not working because the like animal part of my brain telling me you need to get that project done goes away because I'm too relaxed from working out. So so I can't work out in the mornings, for example, because of that fact. If I worked out every morning, I would probably get 30% less work done over the course of the week. Whereas if I switch them, not a problem. And then it actually gives me an energy boost when I do it in the evening. So it's almost like a, you know, the classic term is like life hack, right? And I don't like that term necessarily, but it does sometimes seem like magic, right? When I've structured my day and I'm able to pull it off, and the just amount of work I got done, but also how good I felt doing it was so much higher than if I had approached the day blindly. And that's just something I really noticed for myself. And it's what's allowed me to balance multiple projects and also keep myself healthy while doing things, you know, while working intensely, because I know, okay, if I get a 15-minute workout in, I know I'm going to actually be more productive if I do it in the evening, right? It's going to boost my energy. Whereas if I try to do it in the morning, like I said, I'll get less done. So I think that's where it came from.
That's really interesting, and I think it's a fantastic approach, though. I mean, to really kind of map out what you need to do. I think it is a fantastically productive way of working.
Yeah.
I can't imagine that it's not very beneficial. But it's so strange. I mean, you know about so many great artists that have, I mean, all their work was done at 3 a.m. in a drunken stupor, you know, and then you have people who basically couldn't get anything done if they basically didn't follow a rigid plan. It's so incredible how unique it is, and I didn't really do it at Berkeley either. I mean, in terms of, I always knew that I would get things done, but I never really planned things out. I knew that I had to do this today, so I'll just get that done today, and that was as far as I took it. And I don't know, it might be that for me, I just feel as though there's a certain freedom in knowing that I'm not bound to having to do this then, now, or now. You know, I don't know. And also, I so want to get really bad. I've been to the gym today. Actually, I did that before talking to you, and I'm really trying to get back into it. I've actually lost 8 kgs a couple of months now during the coronavirus. That's kind of crazy, but I actually did, and I really need to lose some weight. But it's not fun for me working out right now. So if I'm gonna wait after work to do the workout, I'm just going to go and dread it anyway. So, I mean, I'll probably be more productive if I just do the whole workout thing in the morning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like you said, it's amazing the difference between individuals in, you know, one species, but we're so diverse and so different with that. Like one person, because like I don't think the structured approach is right for everybody. You know, you put my girlfriend on a schedule and she feels like she's gonna die. You know what I mean? It doesn't work for everybody. And some people, a structure and a very strict schedule feels, like you said, like limiting and very counterproductive, or doesn't incentivize creativity. Where for me, it's like it lets me kind of, in my overactive mind, lets me segment parts of the day to focus on very specific tasks. Where if I didn't do that, I'd be like, oh, I got to go pay the rent, or I got to go do this. But instead I have like a little block, like errands, right? So like, okay, I don't need to worry about it. When I get to that, I'll deal with it then. Almost like kind of what you're describing with kind of waiting till you need to do something, but like just on a micro level, right? On a day-to-day level. Because I also do, like you said, I do find that waiting and letting yourself do something more at the last minute often produces better work for me too. So, you know, and it's like a certain kind of, you know, procrastination is, I think, always frowned on, at least when I was growing up. But I do think it's a useful tool to create like the best possible space for focus, right? Because like, you just need to do it and there's no option and that's what it's going to be. And there's a certain kind of flow state that I think you can get into in that zone. And I think we all have a pretty good subconscious awareness of if we can actually pull it off, right? Like, I think we generally know, like, if I don't start now, it's not going to happen, and that's when we start.
Yeah, no, it's true. So true. And if you kind of feel that the deadline is getting close too, I mean, I think it's kind of good to feel that kind of primal fear sometimes.
Yeah.
Something can come from that. A friend of mine mentioned the other day too, which was very interesting because I'd actually written this. It's more of a kind of a pop song kind of thing, but which I really like, very synthy, heavy thing. And I just loved the tempo of it. But then I just came back and listened to it, and I felt, oh my God, this is probably 15 BPMs too slow. And then he said, well, did you just go to the store or something? Because there's something about, if you just worked out, if your pulse is still kind of, you're at a higher level than what you used to be, your experience of music changes based on basically your own heart rate, the BPM of your own heart, basically. I mean, it changes so much. So it's very interesting how we as creatures are subject to, how we experience things differently just based on what mood we're in. I mean, that's one thing, but also physically, how fast our heartbeats can make us have a completely different appreciation of how a tempo of a piece works, for example. It's fantastically interesting to me. I never really thought about it. And then I just listened to a tune, then I did some push-ups, and afterwards, this is too slow. when I came back, though, then it was fine again. So I go, what is the right thing? That's another question. But still, it's very fascinating.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting. I think that's a good example too. One of the things I've always noticed is that even pitch sounds different to me in the mornings. Right when I wake up, if I put on a song I know really well, it doesn't sound right. It sounds like that's too high pitched and fast. Like it doesn't sound right. And then maybe an hour or two into the day, I'm like, okay, that's right. But it's a weird phenomena I noticed since high school that I want to look into like actual research about it because it freaks me out like every morning. And I don't know if like my brain is processing slower and so like everything's coming in and time is kind of sped up. So the song sounds like they're, just had a little helium and like or
yeah,
like
exactly. Yeah.
tempo. But I'm glad that you noticed that with at least rhythms, makes me feel a little less crazy.
Sounds good.
So I actually want to start to, I want to be mindful of your time. Are there any things about the industry or your craft that frustrate you the most, or like, and that you would want to find a way to improve or change? This could be anything from the way like actual programming in MIDI data works. Like for me, it was horrible at keyboard. I hate dealing with key switches and stuff like that. So I've been learning to use this Wind controller.
Oh
with,
yeah, nice.
With
Really?
sample libraries that have no key switches and are performance based. So basically trying to get good on this so I can actually be a musician and play in parts, with musical, just playing parts musically instead of fumbling around on the keyboard and then going like, well, I hit that eighth note like literally a beat too late, I gotta go fix that. And that's more my lack of skills on the keyboard, and I grew up playing clarinet, so that's one of the things that endlessly frustrates me and saps my time on a project. So is there anything like that? It could be workflow or anything like that.
Just very quickly first, do you have breath control and stuff on that? Things that basically make you do so you can actually have a fluent performance on that thing and transcribe this.
Anybody who's just listening to this, I'm holding up the Akai UE USB. So it's basically a wind instrument. You can program the keys in if you're a sax player or a flute player to have them line up with the notes. And it has a breath controller. So instead of the mod wheel, you use your breath. Also, the mouthpiece has a bite controller, and you can assign all of these parameters into different things. Pitch bend down here. And I also have a foot expression pedal. So I'm trying to map all of these to all the CC data that I use. And I'm trying to be able to actually utilize it and manipulate them all at the same time. So I can basically put my time and energy into learning to play an instrument rather than, because I think there's a higher potential for speed of input data there, right? Because if I can just play everything in and not have to, okay, I'm going to now use staccato, and I can actually just play everything as written in and manipulate the mod wheel with the breath controller expression data with the breath controller vibrato with the bite controller, and another parameter with the other. Like, if I can get good at that like a professional, I can just play in everything, reading it, and be done in a few hours, maybe. Was something that might have taken me 20 before.
No, seriously, yeah. You said actually you wrote down each separate note or just step input, stuff like that. It's a nightmare when you work with orchestral music.
Oh, I know.
It is. I mean, for the Nutcracker project, we didn't. The people who kind of ran this whole thing or were responsible for the whole production, they didn't want to license the music, but they still wanted some of the pieces to actually be fully orchestral. So I actually had to basically record full orchestral Tchaikovsky suites of different things. And I remember one of them is it's 4 minutes of full symphony orchestra, and I think I spent a week basically doing that. And that was playing it on piano, though, too, because, I mean, every single instrument that is doubled. We were talking 3 flutes and the piccolo. We were talking 3 clarinets, each and every line, and stuff like that. And then also when you have not only, of course, the violins playing just their own line, but they are Debussy playing 3 to 4 notes, too. It's just insane. So everything that you can do more fluently there. And also the performance that you get out of something that is so cool. Alex, I really like that. I wish I could do something like that, because for me, it is the keyboard.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense.
Well, to what do I feel in the process? I think getting to know people in the business, I think I have to say that, because of course, they always talked about at Berkeley that, if you go to Norway, you can maybe be a big fish in a small pond, whilst you're a very, very small fish in a huge pond if you go to LA, for example. But at the same time, I mean, it's not that many projects going on, and the 3 or 4 people in Norway that now really do a good job, they do absolutely everything. So there's not many projects out there. It's kind of hard to get on people's good side, because you never get to present yourself in the first place. But then again, that's kind of how it is. So I would actually just say that the process itself of composing, I've been working a lot on the piano skills. I'm actually going to play this wedding, and I'm going to play piano in 2 weeks. I'm going to accompany a singer, though, so it's not that fancy, and it's just 3 songs. But still, I can actually sit down now and write piano pieces and play them, which is kind of nice. And not fantastically, but at least you can just play a piece, you will have it, and then you can just do the little editing that you need. So just the whole input thing is, of course, extremely valuable. And I also love the fact that some of the new instruments, like, for example, the BBC Symphony Orchestra with Spitfire, I think that is it really sounds wonderful. I've written some pieces. I wrote this really Disney. I have an Instagram page where I put some stuff out, so you can listen to it if you want to.
Yeah, I'm gonna get all your social media stuff. Anything you want to share, we'll send it out.
Yeah, and I think it sounds. I mean, it's not wonderfully mixed or mastered or anything like that. It's just done at home, but still, I really think it sounds wonderful. So the whole technology, as it is now, until I think we could probably I think it's strange that we're still kind of in the same MIDI landscape that we are, that they haven't invented something new for 40 years now. Or when did MIDI, was it in the 70s? I don't even remember
Yeah.
when MIDI first came up. I think it was in the 70s, wasn't it? That it was invented by Dave Smith
I'm
and
not
some other
sure.
people. Something like that. Anyway, it's an old technology, and it definitely has its limitations. But I do feel now that after deep sampling really became a thing with, you know, Berlin Symphony, the
Yeah,
strings, the stuff like that, APO, Spitfire, all of those different companies doing wonderful things, you're able to be so much more truly articulate and fluent in what you want to perform, if it's a keyboard or what you do right there.
definitely.
So that has improved a lot. So I don't really, and I kind of love, I'm kind of nerdy when it comes to just noodling around and sitting there doing the MIDI editing. So I'm quite happy to do that, especially when I have my 4 bars that I think sound awesome. So I'm actually motivated to go forward from there. But for me right now, yeah, I just have to say that, you know, I think it's really hard getting projects, really good projects at least.
Yeah.
So that's just a personal complaint because of geography, because where I am, because there's not that much going on right now. But I really feel great excitement every time I'm supposed to do something. And it makes me so happy to think that you can kind of create this new world, this new sonic landscape through creation when you're supposed to make something for some random project. That's a period that I really love. And I hope there will be more of that soon.
Yeah. So moving on, I want to go through a few questions and we can just talk about them really quickly. You mentioned the BBCSO, right? It's so what in general, just quick little sample talk. What do you use for orchestral stuff? What do you like? What kind of sound do you look for when you're looking to buy something, or do you have kind of a core that you use?
It has kind of turned to Spitfire now, since especially for all the orchestral stuff. When it comes to synthesizers and everything else, I just try to use as much analog stuff as I can. I have the Arturia Matrix Brute and the OB6, the Dave Smith, or the sequential OB6, which I just love, and I try to use as little as I can to create as much as possible, because I just want to, you know, be able to kind of dive into one synth, for example, as much as I can. Serum, for example, X for Serum is one that I use a lot. Just trying to learn those and become as proficient as possible with those instruments instead of just constantly buying new stuff. That is something I've tried, just to try to, as I said, get better with those instruments. But at the same time, there's so many wonderful new things coming all the time that can inspire you with, you know, with all their presets and stuff like that. And I've always been kind of bad at, I never felt like I wanted to use presets. So instead of tweaking a really wonderful preset into becoming a wonderful sound, I end up using a more shitty sound that I made myself. That is not a good thing either. But I think Spitfire Audio and BBC Symphony Orchestra for the orchestral stuff is really my main thing right now. And I also have like Olafur Arnalds, the Icelandic composer, with this kind of the more the liquid strings kind of things that he has. But there are so many things, and it's really just a budget thing right now that I'm not buying anything else, because I see so many wonderful things there. Junkie XL Brass would be wonderful to have. I think that sounds really awesome.
Yeah, I just bought the 6-1 sample, like a la carte from Junkie XL Brass.
Oh, you did? Okay, you tried it?
Yeah, so I think it's great. So my entire template is orchestral tools. It's the Berlin series: woodwind, strings, percussion, and brass. That's what I use for 95% of everything.
Right.
And I also have the Metropolis Arc stuff from Orchestral Tools, which I use their like big percussion from that, but I also just layer sometimes their strings. And I'm not a proficient mixer, right? So the fact that they were all recorded with similar, recording chains and all in Teldex Hall really helps them to blend together with my poor mixing skills. So it just really takes a level of kind of trying to like fine tuning to get them sounding in the right space out of the equation for me. So it's really helpful, and I'm a huge fan of orchestral tools. I just like the sound of their products.
Oh, they're great. Yeah.
But actually, one thing I would encourage you to check out is, so that's the ones that are really useful for this it's a tiny little company, this guy named Aaron Venture, and he has a brass library that's pretty incredible, and it's really cheap, and it's performance based. No key switches, control everything in there, every mute for every brass instrument available, growl, bite control, growl, flutter controls, like pretty incredible. If there's any, if you like with this, where I can use, multiple continuous controllers at once, this is like the perfect thing for that. I haven't mastered it.
Orchestral based, or do you also have like a saxophone sections? I know that's technically woodwinds, but still.
In the woodwinds, he has two libraries out, brass and woodwinds, and the woodwinds have saxophones. So, nice. Like a full variety too. There's like every woodwind instrument, like beyond just the standard orchestral setup. And same with brass. There's euphoniums and contrabass, tubas, and it's pretty incredible. I would encourage you to check it out.
Oh, please send me a message with the name of that or something so that I know.
I will. Let's see. What do you have a favorite piece of music?
Right now, I'm actually listening a lot to one of the most fantastic things. It's by Dutilleux, which is a French composer, and it's just find that because that it's kind of semi non-tonal tonal. His name is Henri Dutilleux, Henri Dutilleux, and it's I can't find the name of the work now. It's basically, I think it was written in maybe in the 80s or 90s or something. Really wonderful stuff. That right now, that is something that's just great. And I also saw The Secret of Nim for the first time yesterday. If you remember, I really love Jerry Goldsmith, so I really want to check out some of his orchestrations there. Have you seen, by the way, Legend by Ridley Scott?
No, I don't think so.
No, and that's with Tom Cruise, actually. And Tangerine Dream did the score, but also Jerry Goldsmith wrote a full orchestral score. And there was a waltz at the end of that movie, which is basically this full orchestral and choral thing, which is, if you ask me, fantastic. I mean, you can, this really matches up with some of the great pieces written, I think, when you listen to how this is orchestrated and arranged and how it also works to a scene in a movie. Absolutely fantastic.
I'll have to check that out.
Metaboles, Metabole. I don't know how you pronounce that. I think it's French. Henri Dutilleux, Metabole or something. I think the second movement called the Linéaire is just the most amazing thing I think I've ever heard.
Cool.
That would be to write something like that. Holy smokes.
Yeah, I did my best to write that down, so I will search for it. And if not, I'll message you and have you.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm mumbling around with this stuff.
Oh no. Cool. So at this channel, like clearly we've been talking about, I value like balance in life, and at least in my opinion, it's important to get off topic of music at certain times. So I want to transition to a segment I call the off topic, which I poached from my other podcast because I was like, this section's always great. We have people like these brilliant people on to talk about quantum physics or whatever. And then they ask them this and they'll bring up like, oh, so I'm building a pond outside my house and getting the contractor. I've always loved this section. So this is your chance to bring up a non-music related topic. Could be anything, something said to you in line at Starbucks, a charity, a favorite book, or if you're looking to ruin your career, you could go with a politically divisive topic.
Yeah, I'll stay away from that.
Yeah. So Bendik, what do you have for us?
I'm way too white and privileged right now to say anything like that, I think. I look more red than white right now. Well, whatever. That's a very good question. Before I answer that, you said you have a dog named Teddy?
I do.
Yeah. Yep. What dog is it? Is it a...
I'll go grab him. I'll be right back.
Please do. Oh.
Here he is.
Look at that little guy.
Say
Is
hi.
that basically Benji? Look at him. He is wonderful.
Yeah, he's a great dog. I'll say
Oh my goodness.
say hi.
Oh, my nephew's got a Jack Russell Terrier named Spotty, and he is basically the love of my life.
Oh, that's great. Yeah,
Oh.
he's improved our lives significantly. We got him back when we lived in New York City, and we flew down to Florida actually to pick him up because he was a rescue, and the vets took care of him because he was like gonna die when he was a puppy. So the vet actually took him in and was like, nursed him back to health for like a month. So we found out about him through an acquaintance, and we flew down and picked him up, flew him back up to New York City. So he grew up a city boy. Now that he has some more space, he's happy too. So
right.
A Amstaff, which is like a American Staffordshire Terrier, which is basically like a pit bull mixed with a Maltese. So so his mom was like 50 pounds and his dad was like 10. So he's quite the mix. So he's very thick. He's got a lot of muscle, and we call him a low rider. He's very short. He just almost like a wiener dog, but like super thick.
Yeah, kind of like me.
Yeah, should have named him Bendik.
Oh, he's beautiful. My goodness.
Thank you. Yeah.
Oh, wonderful. Okay. Sorry, I'm probably ending up stealing your time instead. Off topic. Well, I guess this is just more of an interesting observation I can make. A friend of mine sent me these links to I don't know. Have you heard about basically life longevity? Because there's a lot of research going on these days where they kind of feel as though they have now figured out basically that you have your genome, right? Basically the DNA, what decides what we look like, and that we have the epigenome, basically something that kind of binds all the building blocks together, or at least that's kind of what tells our genome or our DNA to, if we need our brain cells to reproduce or stuff like that. The epigenome is kind of what links our genome to telling our body to replicate or refresh ourselves into being the selves that they're supposed to be. And there are people now, serious people, like you have Aubrey de Grey, who is the leader of the Sense Foundation. Have you heard about him?
Yes, I have. This is actually a huge area of interest for me. So it's
and David Sinclair too, basically, professor of genetics and biologist at Harvard. I think it's extremely interesting to think about the fact that, because these are serious people who truly think that there's a possibility for us to lengthen our lifespan. And of course, the whole thing started with a very good intention of trying to make old age basically less ridden with disease and stuff like that. Being able to have bodies that during the process of our lives, we can basically have longer lives that are more healthy, but then, the longevity of our lives, which can potentially now be eternal for all we know, is something that is basically a by-effect of just trying to kind of repair ourselves, which we haven't been able to do so far, and where these people kind of consider aging to be more of a disease than anything else. That in itself, of course, is a huge thing, and I'm not going to start talking about all of that, but a friend of mine had a really interesting observation concerning that, because I thought it was really interesting. And I thought, okay, Aubrey de Grey is talking about maybe in 17 to 20, 25 years, we can get to this point where, what does he call it? Is it life escape velocity, longevity escape velocity? Isn't that what he calls it? That maybe we can get to this point now that in 20 years, we can basically fix so many of the diseases we have that maybe we can have another 30 years. And during that 30 years, maybe we can really unlock the whole genome thing, be able to tell ourselves to replicate it, or kind of basically tell our body to what can I say?
Basically, like repair itself faster than
Repair it, of course, yeah, repair itself, and then we can kind of reset ourselves back to being 40 or 30 or 20 again. And in itself, it's that is going to there's going to be so much philosophy around this, which is extremely interesting. But the one thing that as I said, I'm not going to start a huge thing, because you can talk about this topic for 15 hours straight and not even having started the conversation. But a friend of mine who is kind of an artist illustrator, he was kind of hesitant to this, and the reason why he was hesitant was basically because there is something romantic in getting closer to death. Basically, that not because it in itself is so romantic, but if you live a life where you know that the experiences that you have from being young, you get older, you experience everything through the life you go through, and you also know that there is a finality to it. There is written so much fantastic poetry, so much literature, and so much music from people who have this knowledge in their head that we're all going to end someday. I mean, life is basically, it's terminal. And I'm so interested in how something like this, because if this truly happens, I mean, say theoretically now, maybe I could be 150, because I'm pretty sure, unless I get cancer very soon, that I can at least have 20, 30 years. And if I look at my grandparents, I should become almost 100, because they all were at least 93, 94, 95, and we were expected to have a couple of years on top of that as well. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, what would that mean to us? I think that is an extremely interesting thing that might actually affect us, and fairly quickly, when you see what they're able to do now in terms of already having reversed the age on mice, for example. They have been able to kind of cut these, basically the stuff that connects their eyes to their brains, and they've been able to rebuild them through basically like controlling things through hormones and stuff like that. I mean, it is so exciting. But I'm very interested to see how this will philosophically affect us.
Yeah, that's a great
yeah
that's a great question for it, because there's, like I said, this is an area I'm very interested in too, and most of the talk is around the specific, right, the science of it, and not so much like the artistic implications, or those type of things that produce great work. I wonder, because that's really interesting to think about how perspective of imminent doom, the lack of that would impact things. But also I wonder how much of a new area of expertise it could open up. Like if our brains are able to function like a 30-year-old, and we're able to practice our orchestration for 100 years, what could we be capable of too? I'm sure it would be a massive shift. It's a very interesting topic. And yeah, and to try to catch that, like, is why so much of my life is focused around my health. Because I'm like, if this is something that happens, I don't want to miss out by like 5 years, because like I didn't take care of my body or my health. And I've gotten very involved in it, like doing genetic testing and seeing any genes that I have, like a proclivity to get like Alzheimer's or cancer. Right. And it's interesting too, some of the other things about like, well, if you have the gene for Alzheimer's, there are some things you can do, some lifestyle changes you can make that will reduce those risks. And so for me, it's been very helpful to know what genes I have, so I can kind of think about more how to tailor my, stress. I mean, obviously stress is ideally malleable, right? Yeah, I could vary that, but realistically, I don't know how much it is. But at least like diet and exercise, I can kind of, or things like fasting too, try to. So for example, for me, just so if people don't really know much about it, for example, I have a very decreased risk for Alzheimer's, right? I don't have any of the copies of genes that give you a tenfold risk of getting it, basically. And if you have 2 copies of it, you get like 100-fold risk or something like that. don't quote me on the numbers, but it's insane, the connection on the ApoE4 gene. But I do have some elevated cancer risks. So there's different lifestyle things, for example, that can help to regulate cell growth. And there's kind of I probably shouldn't get too much into this, but there's kind of a trade-off between keeping your brain healthy and keeping your body at the lowest possible risk for developing cells that replicate and become cancer cells, basically. So
Right.
it's interesting, and I'd encourage people to look into it, at least in some form.
Definitely, yeah. Absolutely.
But that's super interesting. I'm glad you brought that up, because these are some of the ideas that I'm actually going to make a video, not specifically around that, but around, like I mentioned before we start recording, the idea about doing what you love longer and being able to continue doing it into old age.
Sure.
So yeah, I think I'm going to wrap it up here, but Bendik, this has been awesome. If somebody wants to check out your work or contact you, how could they do so? What's the best place to get in touch with you and listen to what you do?
Right now, well, I have some stuff out on just my Instagram account. Basically, I've discontinued my website. I didn't really get to use it that much, and it just cost me money. So I thought Instagram is just as well. So I think it's just my ID there is just Bendik Hval, BENDIKHVAL. It's just my name. Simply get that out. And other than that, I'm on Facebook, but just as a private person. This is actually going forward now. I have been still, trying to work on getting better at different things. And I haven't done the huge push out on social media and stuff like that, because I've constantly been working basically through people that I know and connections that I've slowly made. So I haven't really needed to be that much out there kind of things, because I've been fortunate in that regard that I've actually gotten work just through people that and do one gig and you get another one and stuff like that. But I really want to have a much more broad presence out there, and I will work on that more as it comes. But right now, I think basically my Instagram is I just have 18 things out there that people at least can listen to on the IGTV thing. And other than that, yeah, you have info there. I think that's about it.
All right. Well, thanks again for coming on, and it's great.
Thanks for having me, Alex. It's been so wonderful to see you again. I've been missing our days at Berkeley.
Oh, same. I miss, after class walking down, just standing on the corner of Westland and just like talking about whatever's going on and stuff. So miss days. Those are the times I look back on fondly, when
Absolutely.
in contrast with some of the other times.
Yeah. There were some bad times too.
Yeah.
There definitely were.
Yeah. But all right, buddy. Well, thanks for coming on, and we'll talk soon.
Great stuff. Catch you later, man.
All right, buddy.
Take care.